What's up everyone, we're back at it again. My name is Brad and welcome back to my channel. Today what I want to do is I want to do two things. One is I want to talk about why I decided to chop my Fiddle Leaf Figs. And the second thing I want to do is I want to talk about how to care for these beautiful Fiddle Leaf Fig trees. Actually, before I get into the video, I want to quickly thank everyone who is subscribed to the channel so far. We're at over 750 subscribers and we're well on our way of hitting our goal of 800 subscribers. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel to help us hit that goal of 800 subscribers. Now, let's get into the content. So why would I chop a Fiddle Leaf Fig? Well, there are a couple of reasons why you would do it. One of the reasons has to do with branching. As you can see, these Fiddle Leaf Figs, they do have quite a bit of branching. Now, the branching is a result of a couple of things. One is a tremendous amount of light. So we're outside and these leaves get full direct sunlight, no scorching. And one of the reasons why they don't scorch is because these leaves have been acclimated to the sun. If you don't acclimate, these leaves will scorch, they will burn, and they will drop off. The second reason why these Fiddle Leaf Figs are branching is because not only are they getting that bright sunlight from the sun, but they're also being fed. I try to feed them pretty regularly, at least once every 1 to 2 weeks. And finally, the third reason why these Fiddle Leaf Figs have their branching pattern is because I've chopped. I'm gonna switch camera angles so you can really get an idea of what it looks like after you chop Fiddle Leaf Fig. I also have a series where I am documenting the weekly process of what my Fiddle Leaf Fig looks like since giving it the big chop. Now, before I switch the camera angles, I want to talk about why I decided to chop these Fiddle Leaf Figs. This Fiddle Leaf Fig here on this side used to be quite tall, and this one on the right side was a little bit shorter but still fairly tall. The leaves were looking fairly raggedy, they were drooping, and it really was being neglected, these two Fiddle Leaf Figs were, and I wanted to reinvigorate it. And the easiest way to reinvigorate is to give them a chop. Trust me, they will rebound. It's just a matter of pulling out those shears and just chopping the tree. Okay, so let's switch the camera angle so I can show you what these Fiddle Leaf Figs look like. So as I said before, I had to chop these trees of my Fiddle Leaf Fig because they weren't looking as healthy as they should look. You can see that these leaves are nice and upright. There's no drooping. Drooping typically happens when you're over or under watering and if your tree isn't getting enough sunlight, but these trees are nice, firm, and upright. That's what you want in your leaves. But when we zoom in, we'll actually see some of the branching that I'm talking about. So for this particular Fiddle Leaf Fig, I cut right here, right above my thumb, and that cut actually resulted in 2 additional branches. I also cut right above, switch angles here. I also cut right here as well, and again, 2 branches. Finally, I did another cut here, and I have 2 branches as well. And I also have additional growth that's coming from the stem lower down. Now, last season when I did a chop, I got these 3 primary branches. So I have a chop right here, and you can see the wound has healed over. A nice thick branch, a little bit of a skinnier branch, but still a branch nonetheless. Now moving over to this Fiddle Leaf Fig, as you can see, I did a chop right here, and it resulted in 3 branches. So I have a branch, and I have another branch right here. Oh, actually, I have 4 branches. Another one, and then actually a 5th branch. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that your Fiddle Leaf Figs will definitely bounce back and they will reinvigorate with growth after you give them a chop. A big chop is a great way to do a reset for any of your plants. Let's actually go over to this Ficus altissima yellow gem and you'll see what I mean. So when looking at this Ficus altissima yellow gem, which is a tree that's in the same ficus family as the Fiddle Leaf Fig or the Ficus Lyrata, you'll see that I have basically the same thing happening. So I've chopped, and then I have chopped, and just look at the tremendous amount of branching. Again, chopping is just one of the ways that you can ensure that your trees have a nice, beautiful branching pattern. Another thing that you can do is notch, but we won't get into that in this video. When it comes to caring for your Fiddle Leaf Fig trees, there are a couple of things that you need to remember. The first thing is light. When your Fiddle Leaf Fig is indoors, you want to give it as much light as possible. You'll hear people a lot of times say they like bright indirect sunlight and not to give them bright direct sunlight. Well, these Fiddle Leaf Figs are outside and they are receiving bright direct sunlight, and the leaves, no problem, no scorching, beautiful, wonderful growth. The key though into making sure that these trees look good when being kept outdoors is to acclimate your trees properly. If you don't acclimate, what will happen is your leaves will scorch. And when your leaves scorch, well, that's it. You just have to hope that your tree will become bushy enough to kind of hide those scorched leaves. If you do properly acclimate your leaves, you'll get these nice, beautiful, erect leaves that are just these dark green colors. Now, these Fiddle Leaf Fig leaves haven't yet reached the full maturity that they're going to reach, in the sense that after performing a chop, it takes some time for the leaves to reset. So I do expect for these leaves to become even larger. So with that being said, when we talk about the light requirements for Fiddle Leaf Figs, it really depends. You can give it anywhere from bright indirect sunlight to direct sunlight. The key is just making sure that you properly acclimate it to whatever condition that you're giving it. Now, if you don't give it the proper amount of light, you might notice things like droopy leaves or browning leaves, or just the Fiddle Leaf Fig that isn't overall happy. The internodal length, so the length between think of it as the length between where your leaves are forming. So basically like this bare stem area is purely determined by how much light your tree is getting. The more light it is getting, the shorter that internodal length is going to be in giving you that bushier looking tree. The less light it's getting, the longer that internodal length is going to be, which is going to result in more of a lanky looking tree. So if you find that your tree has just a large internodal length, try giving it some more sunlight. Now keep in mind too that when you give it that greater sunlight, the internodal length is only going to become shorter at the new growth. It's not going to become shorter at the old growth. But all in all, ultimately, giving your tree the most light possible is extremely beneficial and will help the tree just thrive and flourish and be the best self that it can be. So working from the top down, another key component into making sure your Fiddle Leaf Fig is the best that it can be is stem strength. I really feel like that isn't talked about nearly enough. Sometimes when you get Fiddle Leaf Figs, you'll notice that they have supporting structure. This can be anything from a dowel rod to anything that will help the tree remain upright. This is detrimental to the health of your tree. What you want to do is you want to make sure that your trunk can become as thick and as sturdy as possible. The way to do that is movement. Movement is the only way that you will get a thicker tree. These trees are outside, so they naturally get the movement with the help of the wind. As you can see, this tree right here is naturally moving because I have a light breeze, and just that gentle movement is really all that it needs. Preferably, it would get more vigorous growth, and I actually have a video about how to get a thicker trunk, and one of the things that you can do is shake your tree. But ultimately, if you give your tree movement, it will encourage a thicker, more sturdy structure. I mean, look at the branching pattern of these trees, and you'll see no leaning or no flopping because these trees are properly supporting themselves due to the trunk size. If you can't place your tree outside, or if you prefer to keep your tree inside, one of the things that you can do is you can shake your tree. The shaking movement is what mimics the wind outside, if you will. And by mimicking that wind outside, that is what is encouraging your tree to become thicker. If you get that thicker structure, you will also get a better branching pattern. Your tree is really going to attempt to branch, or it's going to branch more successfully if it believes that it can support itself. These trees want to branch, and if you give it the things that it needs, it will reward you. Trust me. Now, let's switch the camera angle and let's talk about some of the soil requirements. If you like videos like this and want to continue to see more videos about houseplant tips or tricks, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. It's totally free. It would mean a lot. Thank you so much. Now, let's get back into the video as we march to 800 subscribers. Now, let's talk about the soil requirements. The soil is perhaps just as important as the light requirements that your Fiddle Leaf Fig is getting. These things like to be well drained. They like to be placed in well draining soil. So by that, it means that they don't like to be placed in a type of soil medium that will retain too much moisture. Now, this particular Fiddle Leaf Fig, you might notice, is a little bit, it's not as chunky as what this plant would be like if it was grown primarily indoors. Because the plant is outdoors, it needs to retain just a little bit more moisture than if it were placed inside. And the reason is because this plant is constantly transpiring. We have 100+ degree weather outside, and there is a lot of water lost through the leaves. So there needs to be enough moisture in the soil to help with uptake of water and moisture to prevent the leaves from basically scorching and burning out. But if your plant is being grown primarily indoors, you want to try and give it a mixture of about a 50-50 mix of potting soil and perlite. That is going to cause the water to be well draining throughout the pot. So I'm talking about you place your water in top, and several seconds later, you'll see the water coming out the bottom. Now, for this plant as well, like I said, this isn't as well draining as I would have had it if I were placing this plant indoors. But because the root ball has consumed so much of this pot, I don't really have to worry about too much moisture being retained in the soil. Actually, let me show you what the root ball looks like so you can get a sense of what I'm talking about. So here's the root ball of the same tree. As you can see, I do have soil, but I also have roots that have just extended all throughout the root ball. And when I'm thinking about how much moisture I should, or how much moisture I want to retain in the soil, one thing that I have to think about is how much roots are actually taking up the soil space. When you are, again, growing your plant outside for the spring and summer season, you want to have a potting mixture that is a little bit more heavy on the potting soil. But if you're keeping it inside, you really want to try to aim for a 50-50 mixture of perlite as well as potting soil to allow for that nice, good drainage. Now, finally, we need to talk about the nutrients. Feeding your Fiddle Leaf Fig. Your Fiddle Leaf Fig prefers a 3:1:2 NPK ratio fertilizer. This is what is going to help you get these nice dark green leaves, encourage beautiful upward growth, maintain a healthy stem structure, as well as encourage just the right amount of root development as well. If your NPK ratio if you can't find an NPK ratio fertilizer of 3:1:2, just try using an all-purpose fertilizer, 1:1:1, and that is better than nothing. Please feed your Fiddle Leaf Fig and really all of your tropical houseplants because these things are heavy feeders. Be sure though that you only feed during the active growing season, so between spring and summer. That is really when your Fiddle Leaf Fig is going to take up the most nutrients and really benefit the most from whatever kind of food that you're feeding it. So Fiddle Leaf Figs, they absolutely love to be fed. So to recap, Fiddle Leaf Figs, they prefer that bright, direct sunlight, but when placed indoors, just be sure to give it as much light as possible, but no less than bright, indirect sunlight. Otherwise, you're going to end up with drippy leaves. Your Fiddle Leaf Fig also needs to have regular movement in the stem in order to encourage that nice, thick stem structure to support the upward growth. The soil should also be preferably a 50-50 mixture of perlite and potting soil when kept inside. If your plant is being grown outside, however, you want to aim for more of a potting mixture versus perlite because your leaves will transpire all of that moisture that it's getting from the soil, and you want to prevent any kind of leaf scorch. And then also when it comes to nutrients, be sure that you use a 3:1:2 NPK ratio fertilizer. And one thing that I almost forgot, which is watering. When you're watering your plants, you want to make sure that if at all possible, the top few inches of your soil are dry before you water again. you can check a couple of ways. The first way that you can do is you can stick your finger into the top few inches of the soil and see if it comes out dry. Another thing that you can do is you can use a moisture meter, which is a bit more accurate in determining how damp your soil is. My preferred method is just to lift the root ball out of the pot and check what the soil level looks like, or to check what the moisture level looks like of the soil. If that first few inches of soil is dry, I know it's time to water. If, however, it's wet, then I know it's time for me to wait before I water. Otherwise, it could lead to some detrimental consequences, such as browning of the leaves. Because remember too, that overwatering and underwatering are very similar when it comes to their appearance for fiddle leaf figs. Thank you so much for watching why I gave my fiddle leaf fig the big chop, as well as a little bit of a care guide with how to take care of these beautiful trees. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. Again, my name is Brad, and I'll see you on the next one.